Again, my name's Sean. Tonight we're just going to be covering pretty much the place and fill, some overview of that, along with our one-click Magic Tab Rhinestone button. So, at any point, if you guys have any questions, just let me know. As I see those come in, I'll try to answer as many as possible. Hey, Joy. Hey, Paul. What's going on, Dale? Susan? So we're going to kind of just run again through the basics. So if you guys see anything, if you're getting any issues on any of the place and fill tabs or anything like that, let me know, and I'll try to answer some of those questions as well. We got a couple designs we'll kind of run through as well, so we're not just doing basic shapes and stuff too. We'll show you how to use the Magic Tab tool. So again, any questions, just let me know, and I'll try to answer as many as possible. So we'll go ahead and start on the Magic Tab, the Place and Fill tab. And pretty much when you get to this tab here, you're going to see like the inside, outside, add stones. So pretty much before we got the live template editor and stuff, we'd use this to kind of add boundaries, not necessarily contours, but boundaries around vector items as well, which you can still do. But that's why we have the add stones button. So we got a question already. Is there a way to resize the wizard window? Yeah, so right up here on your magnifying glass, you'll see the different options here. So you can zoom in all the way to 200, which is gonna make it really big, and then you can go all the way down to 85. Now you might see your window tab kind of your vinyl colors mess up here. We have a quick little video showing you how to reset that if you are seeing any issues with that, but otherwise you can adjust it that way. All right, so again, before we might have used this tab also to add simple boundaries around designs, which again we still can, but most of the time we're going to have that add stones. The place and fill is where we're going to do most of our rhinestone work. So if we ever want to add the rhinestones, which we probably do, we're going to make sure that add stone is checked. All right, so next couple buttons we have here, we have the magic path, what I'll cover a little bit. We're not going to use this option too much. So the islands, when it asks us our islands, that's just asking us how many rows of stones we want. So when we're doing an outside fill, we have to tell it, do we want 1, 2, as many rows as we want. When we're doing an inside fill, we can tell it how many rows we want, but when when we have a shape like a basic circle or something like that, there's no way of knowing how many rows it's going to take to fill. So if we ever want to fill an object, which I'll show you shortly, we'll leave it at 0, and that will know to fill the object as much as possible. Right? So our space, that's going to be the distance between each stone on your path. So this really shouldn't change from 0.02. If you get into some different stone sizes, you can change it a little bit. But for the most part, we're going to leave that at 0.02. And then our contour and fill line spacing, it's going to be easiest just to add or to use our auto feature. And when we go through the different fills, we'll kind of see how these will affect our shapes or our rhinestones if we change these numbers here. So I'll go through that. Then we have our hatch angle and our corner detect. So we'll cover all those as well when we go through these different path fills. So what I'm going to do for our example is use like a basic rhinestone heart. So if you guys, if you're following along or you want to try this as well, if you go to your basic shapes, up top here it might start with a shape like that. You're going to left click hold, and we're going to just select our heart shape here. So I'm just going to draw about a 3, maybe 4-inch heart, so nothing big. All right. And now we're going to go over some of the different fills when we're using the place and fill tab. So underneath all of our kind of settings here, we have our 4 buttons. So we have our path, our hatch fill, our island, and our offset. So each button kind of has its own place. The one you're probably going to be using the most would be the island fill, and then follow with the path, and then maybe the offset and hatch you won't use those probably as much, right? So the path fill is really simple. You can just take any vector object, and if you actually go to your wireframe, you'll kind of see the path of your design. So where those lines are in your design, that's pretty much where your rhinestones are going to be placed on that path. So when I select path fill, just with one click, you're going to see the rhinestones. And let's go ahead and do maybe a darker color so we can see them a little bit easier. But with that, it's just going to add, and if I zoom in, you'll see it's pretty much on the middle of the rhinestone is going to go on that line. All right. So when we do a path fill, it's just one line, and it's going to go to the outside just like that. Now, sometimes you might, let's say we do a text. I'm just going to do a basic TRW. And go ahead and convert that to an actual vector. So if I do a path fill here, actually that one wasn't too bad, but depending on how close or how small the design is, sometimes those stones will be a little bit closer together. Make it a little bit smaller, and you'll see that, you know, they're not going to be the cleanest lines here. So if usually with the rhinestones, the smaller the design, the harder it's going to be to actually rhinestone that out. So we want to keep that in mind too. But with a path fill like this, if your object's too small, where you have a lot of these stones running into each other, the last option you'll have is this single line. So if you look at the bottom here, it kind of gives us a little preview of what this button's going to do. So left click creates a single line, and right click adds stone. So we want, if we're rhinestoning this, we want to actually do a right click on this button. And it's not going to be perfect, but it will give us a single line of that font. Now, see, in some areas we might run into some problems like that, but that's one way, if we have a really thin object, to sometimes get like a rhinestone design out of it. So the single line we won't use too much, but if the path fill, when we click that, if some of our stones are running into each other, the single line is a good option. So let's take our heart here. And we'll go ahead and do a clear path. So let's just actually get rid of our stones. I'll draw another heart. And we had a question as well, and that kind of pertains to our next button for our island fill. So we said, what if we have an embroidery design that we want to add an outline or accent a row of rhinestones around it? So with that, we're going to use our island fill. So if this is our vectorized design right here, let's say, you know, it's digitized or it's vectored. First of all, when we're doing something like with embroidery, we want to make sure it's the same size. So if you're bringing in your actual digitized design or the vector before it, just make sure it's the same size. And then what we can do is we're going to do an island fill. So if this is our object here, our design, I want to tell it I want to do an island of stones or a row of stones to the outside. So I'm going to select one island. Now if you want 2 or 3 or multiple rows, you just put in that number there. Next we're going to hit contour spacing to auto and fill line to auto. And then all from there we're going to hit island fill. All right, so one button that I didn't check on purpose was this corner detect. And if you look around our heart, as we get to this bottom, this corner, it's not, you know, perfect. We kind of have these stones running into each other here. So if we have objects that have sharp corners like this, instead we can hit corner detect and then island fill. And it sees those corners and gives us a nice fill just like that in both of those tight areas. So the island fill with an island to the outside, that's how we can quickly accent our designs, our embroidery designs or any design or vector we might have into our accent it with that. Sorry, I had a question too. How do you change the vector? So Mark, with that, are you asking like how do you convert a design into a vector, or? So that would be, so depending on like, that would be kind of like a different webinar from tonight. We have in Corel, we have a lot of different tracing features like the trace bitmap or the B-spline. So that would be taking like an image that someone sent you, maybe a logo, and using the trace bitmap feature to kind of convert that to a vectorized design. Or you could use the B-spline and kind of trace the design depending on what the design was. That's going to take a little bit more time. But we definitely, you know, if you check our YouTube channel out and just put like trace, pretty much if you type tracing into our search on our YouTube channel, you'll see a lot of different videos on, you know, tracing with the B-spline or tracing with the bitmap. But yeah, so you would have to first convert it to a vector design in order to use any of these like place and fill features. So that's kind of a great question. If you have just an image, none of that's going to work. Like none of these features will work. You'd have to always convert it to a vector first. So this contour and fill line spacing, what that does for us when we set it to auto like this, let's say I had 3 islands to the outside like this. The fill line spacing is going to know for the next rhinestone path, give us enough space between each line. And then the contour spacing is how far off it comes from our original vector. So by hitting auto, it's going to go from our SS10 stone, because that's what we have in our drop down here. So if I was working with 6s or 8s or 16, 20, you know, anything, any kind of stone, instead of having to know the contour and fill line spacing for each one, you just select auto, select your stone size up top here, and then use, you know, the island fill or something like any of these fill options. So depending, like if most of the time if you're doing a fill, or sorry, not a fill, but like a accent of stones around an object like we just did here, you just want to hit auto, because that way the stones won't ever overlap your vectorized item here or your embroidery item. If you don't set this to auto and maybe it's set to 0.0 or 0.01, what it's going to kind of do for us here is you'll see that the stones actually overlap our vectorized design, our heart. So if I wasn't using this heart, I just had the rhinestone outline, then I could, you know, I wouldn't really care about the contour spacing because eventually I'm going to get rid of my vector inside. But if I'm keeping this maybe as a multi-deck, or if I have an embroidery design here, I want to use that auto space or auto setting, because it's going to automatically space it enough away from that design so it doesn't overlap. So if you're possibly working with, you know, maybe you work with embroidery and you notice, you know, I just need it a little bit further out than what the auto setting is, that's no problem. Our auto setting's right around 0.08, 0.09. So if you were to set that to a larger number, 0.1, 0.11, you know, you can go all the way out as far as you want. But if I were to set this to 0.1, did the same setting, you would see that these stones are coming even further off that vectorized design. So if you want that instead, you just make this contour spacing pretty much larger than 0.1, and that will bring it further off the object. So when we create a design like this that has our corner detect, does anyone know what the problem I'm gonna have if I just sent this, if I just thought, you know, I'm looking at it, I don't see any overlapping stones or anything like that. So if I sent this to the cutter right now, does anyone know what my issue would be with my rhinestone design? Exactly. So we had a couple people mention the overlapping stones. So although we can't see them, we actually have overlapping stones in this design. So at the bottom here, we have a couple tools that will help us see any overlapping stones. So we have our mark top, which I prefer. We have our mark bottom, which sometimes works, but in a case like this, it wouldn't really help us. And I'll show you why. And then we have our merge, which in this case would work fine as well too. So I'm going to highlight my heart, and I'm going to mark every overlapping stone that's on top red. So when I left click this button here, all three of these stones are overlapping perfectly on top of this other one here. And that's what we want it to do. We just want to make sure that before we finish this design, that we're getting rid of all these overlaps. So the reason we're getting these overlaps right here is because we have this corner detect checked. So what that does for us is when we have a line like this here, when it gets to one of these, and actually I'll just make a new one real quick. So when we have these, when I hit island fill, you'll notice that all these stones are connected by this blue line. That's what we call our path. All right, so when it gets, let's say the path starts here, when we have it on corner detect, when it gets to another corner, like the bottom of this heart, it stops the line. So if I pull this out, you'll notice that the line starts and stops here. So what the software wants to do is where that line stops, it's actually going to start the next line. So it's going to end the next line up top here. So in every place it does that, it will have an overlapping stone. But that causes these really nice clean lines instead of kind of the issue we got here of where you get these kind of double stones and stuff like that. So that's what the corner detect's going to do for us. So we want to make sure anytime we use that corner detect that, so again, if I move this line, you'll see the stones right there, and we still have a stone on this line here. So they're always going to be overlapping. So anytime we use that corner detect, we want to make sure before we make our rhinestone templates, we highlight our rhinestones and we use one of these features here. Now, we'll go through different designs when we're using this, but if I were to mark the bottom stones red that are overlapping, you're not going to actually see those stones because they're on the bottom. Now, what the software does for us, though, is still selects all three of them or all six of them for us. So you can actually see how we have like a box around those, and if I move that, it will select those stones. But it doesn't, you don't actually see them, so it's kind of hard. So in most cases, I like to use the mark top because then I can visually see where those stones are overlapping. And there's sometimes where it might be like a slight overlap like this. And when you do that, it's going to mark one of those red. So we don't always want to just remove all of our red ones, because on this case, I could just nudge this one here, nudge this one here, mark it or change it back to the black, and then I don't have to actually remove those. So we only want to keep the, the red ones marked so we know that we can kind of come in, see that it's a, straight overlap because of our corner detect, and then I can delete all those out. Does that make sense with our overlaps and the path and kind of the outside fill? All right, and I don't think I said it, but to clear those paths, when we make our design like this, great question. So we had a question, when do you use the merge? So let me go over this real quick. So when we have those paths, I didn't actually say this, but when we have those paths, those stones are on the path like that. So I can't grab an individual stone. And if I send it to the cutter like this too, you get all those paths. So we highlight our entire design, and right down here is our clear paths. All right. So the question we had next, and you'll see now all those blue lines are gone. So that's a good indication. You should be able to pick on any stone and move it freely, not with a path, or not with a path. Now the next question we had was, when do you use the merge feature? And that honestly is going to take, I would wait for the merge just until you get a little bit more familiar with your rhinestones. Because with my experience, I can look at this design and, and it won't take too long, and you could even visualize this too, but kind of scamming through my design real quick, I really don't see any issues with my stones. Like, I don't see any overlapping lines or path or any overlapping stones. There's no real bad. I didn't do a big path or inside fill, so the lines usually, when we just accent it, are pretty much very quick. There's not a lot of editing. But from my experience, I know that because I use the corner detect option, that every corner, which would be this stone, and this stone, is going to have, a stone underneath it. So this would be a great time to just highlight. And honestly, I could just highlight that group of stones. And you'll see I have 93 objects selected now. So I could hit merge, and you'll see 6 of those went away. So the merge is a great time, especially when it's a straight overlap, because what it will do is just merge those into each other. So that's when I would kind of use that merge tool a little bit more. Sometimes you'll have overlaps in stones where it's just a small overlap like this, and it's not going to be on a line like you see here. I'm just using this as an example. What will happen if we merge those is look how much of a gap we have between our next stones now. So when we do like an inside fill, I'll kind of go over this a little bit more. But in my opinion, this is more work to fix than if I saw this, did a mark top, and then just realized, oh, you know what, if I just nudge this one, and this one just a little, I don't really have any overlapping stones now. So that's a quicker fix to me than going back and respacing or adding stones like that. Yeah, so we had a question too, using one of our Rhinestone fonts. And Vanessa, you almost answered your question in there. You didn't hit the resize. So let's pull up one of our fonts. I hope I have that. I should have that one installed. Okay. So we were using the Stadium Rhinestone here. And if you zoom in, now mine look pretty good in this case, but sometimes with some of our fonts, and let me see if I can just pull up a different one or something that might not look as clean. Not all the stones are going to be perfect circles when they're in the font form. Okay, so they might look like ovals. They might not look like perfect circles. Now this is Rhinestone, so I'll cover it a little bit, but we do have some webinars just on the Rhinestone fonts too. But there's a few rules when you're using your Rhinestone fonts. So one is, let's say I'm starting new, I'm type the word baseball, and I select, I'll go back to the Stadium just so we can use that. And I select Stadium, all right? So if I'm trying to resize my design, it might look small when we first type it out, but when we're using any Rhinestone font, you cannot resize by pulling on the height or width for your design, because that definitely will make them look like ovals and stuff like that. So you don't want to sit there and say, you know what, I want this actually taller, a little bit wider, and so on. Because the minute you stretch your Rhinestone, either horizontally or vertically, it won't process correctly with the wizard. Okay, so if we want to resize, if I type this out, if I type the word baseball, I use our Rhinestone font. If I want to make this bigger for my preview, I need to drag from the corner so it adjusts my height and my width at the same time. So it's always keeping that font proportionate. Again, if I pull from the bottom just a little, my Rhinestone font is now messed up. Okay, so up top here, you have this little lock ratio. So again, you can do it this way too. So I could type in 12, make sure that this is locked, and it will automatically adjust my height with it. Now, again, this doesn't mean anything at this point because we haven't resized it to our rhinestones yet. So I can resize this all day to, 11.5 inches, but these aren't actual rhinestones until I come up top here and hit my resize button. So once I do that, it's going to say not all stones are 0.135. Yours might say 0.130. It's okay. Hit yes. And then you'll see it change its size. So it actually brought that in to 9.5 inches. So once you hit that resize button, all your stones should be perfect circles. So they might look like ovals at first or just not a perfect circle. But once you hit that resize button, they should all go to perfect, whatever option you have selected here, perfect circles. Unless, again, if you pulled from the height or the width instead of the corner to keep it proportionate, then it's not going to work correctly. All right, and this is a kind of a good font too, because now the way it is, it's a script font, so we have a lot of overlapping stones. So this is where I would, again, highlight my design, mark top. You'll see all those red stones. So in this case, I'm kind of looking at all of them, and I'm going to pull it down. And when you do that, you can kind of see some issues here with some spacing, right? We have some weird spacing going on in this design. Or not this design, but because we just pulled those out. That's okay. We're going to delete those. And then to fix this, does anyone know the best way to fix this problem here? Now, okay, I could maybe fit a stone in, but this doesn't fit perfect. So instead of having to like move this one, then move this one, then move this one, does anyone know what tool I could use to kind of fix this all in one button? All right, so Heidi, you're close. You said distribute. So yeah, distribute spacing or we respace. So pretty much what you said there. So at the bottom here, we have our respace tool. So right next to the clear path, we have this button with the 2 arrows going out. That's going to be our respace tool. So instead of using your arrows or anything like that to nudge, when we had an issue like this, I can hold shift. I'm going to select one stone, hold shift, and then I'm going to follow that kind of path just up. And you don't have to select them all, just, I think I have 9 selected right now. Hit our respace, and just with one click, it's going to make the spacing between all those stones that we selected equal. So I can nudge this one up, and obviously I have some spacing issues here now. So then I just select these stones here, respace. This one kind of went into that line, so at that point I would just maybe nudge that one up or nudge this one down. But that's how we're going to quickly fix any of those issues, especially with a font like that. We kind of have to know going into it. We might have to go back and edit a couple stones like that, but it gets to the point, if you keep moving stones manually, it's going to take a lot longer. You're going to sit there and try to hopefully, make the spacing equal, and then you'll zoom out and you'll be like, oh, that doesn't look that good. So the respace is going to save you a lot of time when it comes to issues like that. And then we have a question, can you use other fonts besides TRW fonts? So Betty, with that, are you at like other Rhinestone fonts, or just other fonts in general? All right, so while we wait to answer for that, we'll get into the next feature of the island fill. Okay, other fonts in general. So you can convert fonts into rhinestones. That's going to be, depending on the look you're wanting, that's going to either be like a path fill or an island fill, which we're going to do next, or possibly a hatch, depending on the design or the font itself. The reason why I don't really recommend that, where I think, I don't know, there's other rhinestone fonts out there, so I'm not trying to push ours in general, but I'm just saying a rhinestone font is going to save you a lot more time than you trying to stone out every word yourself. So like just with the design here, or the word we just did there with baseball. So if I have this nice script rhinestone here, I can write out the word baseball. Well, next, someone's going to say, oh, well, I like that with football. And instead of, if it's not a font, you're then going to have to type out football and redo it all over again. But with a font, you can, just type the next word, resize it, and you're done. So there's a lot of font. We have hundreds of rhinestone fonts. There's other fonts out there. So, I would look into more of the fonts to save you time, but you can use, the simple tools that we're using, like the island or path fill, to take, a standard font. Let's say, and I'm just taking a vector font. This is, again, one of ours, but to type the word football like this, you have to make sure everything's sized out. So let's say they wanted it 11 inches. You'd have to size it, weld it, and then use like the island fill inside. And this is kind of the results we got with this kind of script font. So it's a little bit, it's not perfect. It would take some time, but then I would have to go through this whole thing and edit it. So it's definitely possible, but it's very, like the rhinestones, especially like a full fill or a font, that's the most time consuming part. But yeah, I mean, we have, thank you, Claire. We have designs, like we have fonts that are free, so you can try them out. Plus, I mean, most of our sales, you can get those fonts for a pretty cheap price too. If you follow us on our YouTube or Facebook, we're always doing design sales, which include fonts. So you can, you can do it. It's just going to be a lot quicker, I would think, to purchase like a font that, we have athletic fonts, we have script fonts. We pretty much have a lot of the basic fonts you see converted already for you. So we had a question on the heart design. I had 3 rows of rhinestones. I click the mark top and I get an error. With that, make sure you're clearing your paths and everything beforehand. And that could be like one reason you're getting an error. All right, so now we're gonna move into the inside fill of a design. We're gonna get a little more into the respacing. So this is usually where most people, I guess, not have issues, but just the most questions on and stuff like that. So if you guys see anything different or have any questions, just let me know. But this is gonna go for pretty much most of the shapes you have are gonna have like curves and stuff. And the different, like, instead of like a really blocky one, so let me write baseball again. And what I mean by like a blocky design, probably won't have it too much with most of the designs, but possibly like an impact font, or college is another good one, where instead of having nice curved lines, everything's just kind of squared off. So nice, not a lot of curves like you see here. It's just kind of blocky. So in most cases, your designs or fonts are going to look more like the heart. So that's where we're going to use the island fill to fill this entire design. If I use the hatch fill, it looks pretty good, but when I get to the top part here, you can see the hatch fill has trouble kind of filling that out. And the lines here, there's a lot of space between our outside lines. And when you do the hatch fill, you can't just like grab this path, respace, because that's when, oh shoot. And that just happened because I still had a path in there that I selected on accident. So cancel all that. I'll show you. Hey Peggy, no problem. We're just getting started. So while I get that back up, we had a question about Magic Flock. Once you cut the design, how many times can you reuse it, and what's the best way to store it? So you can reuse it, over 100 times as long as you keep the flock in good condition. So it's not like it's necessarily going to go bad. What can happen with the flock to kind of make it so it's not as reusable? Usually if it's a one color design, you're really not going to run into this issue. But if it's like a multiple color, we layer our flock on top of each other. So it's going to catch some of those fibers and stuff like that of the flock underneath it. So that could be one way where it loses some of its stickiness. But if you ever see that issue, or maybe it's just catching fibers, or you have it on a desktop and it's catching like dirt or little stuff like that we're not really seeing, you can use soap and water to kind of clean that off on the backside. And then when we store it, we usually what we'll do is take a piece of hot fix transfer tape where it still has the backing on it, and we just kind of cut a shape that size to fit our template, put our template on that, and then we'll just kind of put it in a folder, and we have like a filing cabinet, or we have like a little kind of wood shadow box that we kind of fit all those into as well. So that's probably the best way to store it. But if there really you should be able to use it a lot. That's the whole point of the Magic Flock. You cut it once and you can keep reusing it over and over and over again. So if you're having trouble with any of that, when you're done with it, you just want to take it off, put it on your hot fix, and store it. But if you are having a design that might have layers to it, or you're putting it right on top of the flock, it's obviously going to catch some of those fibers more, and that's when you can use like just water or soap to kind of scrub off the back, and that will bring it back to life a little bit. All right, so go back here, and we'll go to replace and fill, and we're doing an island, and we're doing it inside. So we did the hatch fill, and we saw the issue with like a shape like this. So what we want to do is our island fill. Again, we're going to hit add stones, auto. Now, when we're doing a fill to the inside, it doesn't matter, as this contour doesn't have to be set to auto. The reason why is, let me pick a darker color again. So you'll see here, when I started this design, I put I put contour spacing to auto, and that way it doesn't really touch, or it goes to the inside of this line here. Now, in this case, we're not, unless we're doing like one of those decals that has the stones on top of it, like the Bling Anything glitter decals, we don't really need this object behind it when we're done. So sometimes when we're working with different fills, the contour spacing, like if I change this, actually let's leave that, let me make a copy. I'll leave that one there so we can kind of see the difference. But if I change this to like 0.01, see how much different of a fill we get in this area here? So this is going to be a little bit quicker to edit than my design here. All right, so when we do these fills, we might want to play around with our contour spacing a little bit just to see if we do get better fills just by adjusting our contour spacing a little bit. And it sounds like it's not like a, it's a little just contour spacing, but it can make a difference, especially when we get into smaller designs. So if I had a heart that I was trying to fill, I actually probably want a smaller contour so it can maybe fit a little bit more in there. And that's the thing, with any rhinestone design, the smaller it is, the harder it is to fill. So if you're ever getting like an error, let me see if I can make this. Well, I should be able to make it small enough. Where you get object variable or with block variable not set, essentially what this error is telling you is that the inside area of this design isn't big enough to hold stones. So sometimes you'll get like a script font that back to our game day. Let's see if this is actually a pretty thinner one, but Flutter should be one that works pretty well. So in a design like this, you might have parts of your design like here that aren't actually wide enough to have a rhinestone fit inside of it. So if I drop a stone here, well, first of all, let's make our design an actual size. So let's say this is at 5 inches now. So our rhinestone will fit on the inside here, no problem. But when we get into like some of the tighter areas up here, it's going to run into an error. So sometimes, let's go ahead and weld this into one design or one object. I'll do the island fill, and see, just like that, it's going to give us an error. Sometimes it might try to lay a couple stones down in some of those areas, but if you're getting like something like that on a design, it's because there's issues throughout your design that are making it too small. So in a case like this, you'd probably have to hand place these stones. Now you don't have to go one by one. We can actually use the Respace tool to help us with that. So you can make a copy by hitting the space bar. So as I'm hovering over this line, I'm hitting the space bar and just releasing. So I'm left click holding, and then when I get to those points, I'm just hitting the space bar, and that's adding a copy. So if I had this little part here, instead of dropping 15 stones or 10 stones on this line, whatever it might be, I'm doing a stone every once in a while. And then I can hold shift, select each stone one by one, hit my respace. I think I hit the space bar twice on each one, so it just duplicated. So let me get rid of those. That's why it looked weird. So now I'm going to hold shift, click all those, respace. You'll see how it spaces the line. And now we have this up and down arrow here. So I can add stones to that line once it's on there. So just like that, now I have my finished line. I click off it, select that line, and just hit delete. And you might have to go back and just nudge one or two just to kind of fill that line a little bit better. But that's going to save us a lot of time instead of having to go through, each part and hit, okay, I got one there, got one there, got one there. Instead of having to do that all the way through your design, you would just, drop one here, here, and maybe here. And with the respace, hitting the up arrow, that fills that line a lot easier. So there's gonna be, objects that are too small to fill with the software, and that's when you can manually do it. Again, that's gonna take a little bit more time, but you can do, any design like that as well. All right, so with our inside fill here, it looks like, we have some trouble areas. That's okay. This actually isn't going to be too bad of a fix. So you'll notice, again, all of our stones are on those blue lines. So the first thing we want to do is highlight and hit clear pass. And if you want, some people like to have like the heart behind it to help them see it. So if you want to add a little color to kind of see your shape, feel free to do that. Next, we're gonna clear all of our overlapping stones. So I'm gonna select one stone. And the reason I'm doing this, I'm gonna select one stone and then all the same size, which is this button right here. That's going to select every rhinestone on my page just like that are SS10s. All right. The reason I only, does anyone know why I only want to select the rhinestones in this case? Because I have that vector behind it. Yeah, exactly. So if we're using our path, our mark top or bottom, if I select this heart in every rhinestone and mark my top overlapping red, oh, that could, actually, it didn't do it this time. What you'll get sometimes is that it sees this shape as an object. Oh, let me convert it to curves. That's probably why. Let's see if it does it now. Okay, so we might have fixed it, but sometimes what you'll see is when you select the heart or the object behind it, is every stone wants to turn red because it sees it as two layers and there's an object on top of it. In this case, it's only doing the stones, which is good, but I like to just get in the habit of probably selecting one stone, select all the same size, which will again select every stone, and then do the mark top. All right. So we kind of have this Y looking our upside down peace sign that are all marked red. So in this case, I'm just going to move all these and hit delete. So all we have to do to kind of finish our design now is fix our spacing issues. So here we have kind of this stone here. I'm just going to move it up, just nudge that one. And you can go all the way across if you want, but I'm just going to kind of select all the stones in this path. And I'm just going to hit respace. And that's going to respace them. In some of the areas like where you have a bigger gap, you might want to hit up on the arrow, and that's going to add another stone to that path for me. So just kind of give it a quick glance. There might be, because of the shape, there might be a couple overlaps. So we're going to fix those just by nudging. And then kind of this area looks pretty good here. So the next spot, we'll just go maybe from this stone. Then we have a gap, and we're just going to go straight across. Respace. Add a stone. Again, I'm just holding shift and clicking the stones. Unfortunately, we get this question a lot, but you can't just select like the entire design and do a respace. So I can't just like highlight this path or this group of stones and hit respace. It needs to know the direction the respace is going. So like here, if I just select these stones here, it's going to respace this line for me. So that's how we unfortunately have to do these respaces. So this is the most time consuming part when we get to like rhinestones, is the respace section. But at the end of our design, and I should make like a quick copy of this just so we can kind of see the end. Once we just hit all these respaces, this is what makes our design pretty much stand out and makes it look a lot cleaner and nicer than just kind of a basic fill. Nudge this one just a bit. And as you make these respaces, you'll see it leaves all these lines behind. During the spacing, or after you space it, you can click on that and delete. Now, once you click off, let me do this line real quick. Once I hit respace, all those stones are on a path or a line. So I can hit up or down on this arrow and it'll either add or remove a stone from that path, right? The minute I click off, that path is dead. So if I click on this line here and I hit up or down with it, it's not gonna add stones to that line. So when you're going, if you want, you can click on that line and delete them as you go. Or at the end, you can highlight everything, hold Control and hit clear path, or sorry, hold Shift and hit clear paths, and it'll get rid of all those lines we just made. So you can kind of do it all at once at the end, or you can slowly delete them as you go if they're in your way. So let's go ahead and finish this off real quick. Again, you know, the respace, this is the only part of the design that, or only part that really takes a little time. Most of the time you're gonna have to do this is when you do a full fill on a design. Otherwise, like when you just accent it, it really shouldn't be too much editing. So we'll go ahead, let's get rid of these backgrounds. And you can see now the difference, and there might be, you know, we could maybe nudge a couple. Once you kind of move the background, you can see some problem areas. But just from a couple quick respaces, you can see the difference in the overall quality of the design. So when you're, you know, doing a fill and you have your design looks like that, don't panic. That's actually a pretty good design and shouldn't take, you know, that long with the respaces to kind of clean that up real quick. And even when I'm done with something like that, I always still like to hit my mark top or bottom or merge just to make sure that I don't have any overlapping stones. Because when you're doing those respaces, there's times where you might accidentally have two stones like that now. So when you're done, just kind of go through and just make sure, just highlight your design, you know, any of these three buttons. Again, I like to use the top, but if you have your own method, you can do it that way too. All right. So any questions on the island fill, path, or hatch fill? So the last button we have there is the offset. Again, the offset and the hatch are probably the two you won't use the most, or the two you'll use the fewest. What the offset will do for us is, a good example I could think of is possibly like a wave design or a single line. So let's say I have a line like this and I just wanted kind of a look of a wave, right? Well, one, you could do the path fill. And if you do the path fill though, and let's say you just want a couple lines, so then I start making a duplicate there and a duplicate right underneath, right? Well, the issue with that is you'll see some of these areas, they look good, and then we run into some where they all get combined, and you know, we don't want that. So the offset allows us to have a line like that, and instead of running into issues like that, it counts for that. So if I hit 3 to the outside and then offset, it takes that line and actually, let me kind of show you this way. So, well, when you have a horizontal line like this, outside goes to the top. And if I wanted those lines to the bottom of this, I would do inside, and that would go underneath my line. But you can see now how nicely it follows each path here, so you don't get any of those stones kind of running into each other. All right. Now, if I try to do the same thing with an island, Oh, so I need to do it. One, you'd have to do it to the outside. But even though I wanted 3 rows, an island wants to put rows to each side of it. So instead of 3, I'm actually getting, well, there's actually 6 rows, but because the line's so small, both 2 are kind of overlapping each other, so it looks like 5, but there's actually 6 rows of stones there. And then sometimes, this one didn't do it too bad, but sometimes on the edges it can get really jumbled up too. So if you're doing like single lines like that, or just a, a unique shape or line, that's where the offset can be helpful, because it's gonna find all those kind of curves, and it's gonna naturally add stones correctly on that second and third line. Where again, if you just had one line and you tried to make a duplicate, it's just, unfortunately, it's just not gonna look, it's not gonna be able to follow that line perfectly, and then you'll have some parts overlap while others look good. So that's where we use the offset. So again, we're not going to use the offset too much, but it is a useful tool, depending on what we're at, what type of design we're making. So does that help with the offset? All right, so that kind of covers just the kind of basic overview of the place and fill. Now I didn't get into any of this. This is more for our scatter designs, and we have multiple webinars on that. And I can even do like a follow-up webinar if you guys want on some rhinestones, where we maybe get a little bit more detailed, like a actual rhinestone design, where I can introduce some of the scatter effects and stuff too. But I will show you one that you can use, and most people don't even realize that this is here, but this is a drop down. So you'll see first outline text, that kind of gives you settings, second outline, but we also have this faded heart, 10 islands. Hey Carol, no problem. So the scatter, if you just try to figure it all out yourself, it's going to be a little complicated. But if you drop this down to faded heart 10 island, it's going to populate these boxes down below. Don't worry too much about all these, just keep it on scatter contour. But it's going to say faded heart 10 island. You can use any basic shape you want. So let's say you have even like embroideries and stuff like that. Let's say we have a monogram design that fits in a nice circle like this, or any shape. You can just drop that down to faded heart 10 island, hit island fill, and you can see that it gives you a nice scattered design just like that, right? So we have all these blue lines here. Those are our paths. So we definitely want to highlight and hit clear paths. And that's our nice rhinestone scatter. And now this is a perfect circle where I could put, a monogram in there, a sports ball in there, anything I wanted, and it would have like a rhinestone scatter around the outside. Now what you guys are going to run into when you use this button is, if this circle's too small, or that beginning shape's too small, you might hit island fill, and then you might get these like a nice scatter for the first couple rows, but then you see some of the outside rows go back to a completed rhinestone circle like that. All right. Does anyone know what the problem is with an issue like this? Yeah, this one's a little more advanced. So this issue is, if we look at our decrease count by 8, every row that we get out to, it decreases our stone count in each one. That gives us that scatter look, right? So if we go to our outside row here, this one here, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 stones on it, right? So If we're telling it to decrease each row by 8 and there's only 6 stones, the wizard errors out. And that's when you see these full lines after it. So if I made this circle a little bit bigger, same thing. Okay, now I only have those 3 lines. So I think, okay, if I make it a little bit bigger, now I have a nice scatter design. So there's two, that's one fix. Or if I go back to a smaller circle, I can change my decrease count to a smaller number, and then it won't run into those issues either. So to get different scattered looks throughout your design, you can change your decrease count and then you'll notice how different our scatters can start to look. So by changing your size or possibly your decrease count number, and if you get an error like that and you like this scatter, you can always click on that last path and just delete it out, and then just hit clear paths, and you still have a fine scatter, right? So you always have that option too, but just by changing your decrease count and the size, that's going to give you different looks. And then lastly, up here you'll see it's 10 islands. So on these designs we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So we have still 10 rows of stones. So if I'm here and I'm getting that error, I can technically too just tell it, hey, I only need 6 islands, and then I'm not running out of stones either too. So you can always change your islands too, and that will determine how far out that scatter goes. So if I have a decent sized design and I tell it 20 islands and decrease each one by 2, you can do that. It's going to be a pretty big design, but technically you could make that design if you wanted to, and that would be your scatter look. So we have free webinars on just the scatter. So if you guys want to see a little bit more on that, you can definitely check that out on our YouTube channel. But that little drop down right there makes it really easy. So all you really have to play around with is your decrease count or your islands, and then you can get a lot of different scatter looks like that. All right. So now we're going to get into our magic tab, and these are some of the one-click buttons for our rhinestone design. So we have our stone outline, our stone knockout, and our stone outline with contour. All right. Can you do scattered with fonts? No, you're going to have to draw like a shape around the font itself, like either a rectangle or circle or like an oval shape, and then add it around the outside. It doesn't do well when you just select the font itself. Yeah, so after we just had a question about the recorded version. After tonight, I'll render it tomorrow and then usually have it up the next day. Sometimes it might take 48 hours, but for the most part, you'll have the recorded version tomorrow. Now, what you'll need to do for that, depending on how you access this webinar, whether it be if you purchased, which it's a free webinar, but if you purchased it through the site and got the link that way, I'll put the recorded link there where you got the registration link today. If you just followed like the direct link from the email or our Facebook or the top of the website, you won't. The only way you'll see it is you'll either have to go to our YouTube channel once it's uploaded. It'll be there for free, or you can go back and actually purchase it from the site. Put like again, it's free, so you're not really paying for anything. You're just checking it out in your cart, and then that way you'll get the recorded link right there. All right, so we have our stone outline button, and a lot of times what we see with this stone outline is, I'm just going to grab a soccer ball. And this is actually, I want to show you a couple things with this when it comes to rhinestones. Let's go back to the place and fill one time real quick. We're going to do an outside fill, add stones, one island, auto, auto. Let's default that. So one, add stones, auto, auto. I don't need a corner detect because this is a perfect circle. I don't have corners in it. All right, so this is kind of some of the questions we get quite a bit, or errors we see with the rhinestones, is I am telling it I want an island of a row of stones to the outside of my soccer ball here. I told it to add stones, the contour spacing to come off of it, and the fill line is just auto, and it's at 1, so it doesn't really matter anyways. Can anyone tell me what my issue is going to be if I just select my soccer ball as is, so you can see that I have these cutouts, and I say island fill? So Heidi, you pretty much nailed it before I even got the question done. You said the inside. All right. So even though I'm saying I want it to the outside of this this soccer ball, when I click island fill here, see how it tries to fill? Technically, this is the inside, but it fills rhinestones in here too. Does anyone ever run into that issue? Where we literally just want a stone outline, right? The issue with this is technically it sees the outside is not only to this way, but this is the outside of this side of the line too. So when we have a soccer ball or any shape that might have inside cavities to it, if we want just a row of stones to the outside of this soccer ball, does anyone know what I'd have to do instead? Jennifer, good guess. We said stone outline. So I'll show you why that's not going to work for us too. So that actually plays in well. So Jennifer said stone outline. Sorry for throwing you on the bus, Jennifer. No one knows your last name though. So if I hit stone outline here, so that just had the boundaries or the path still in it, so that's why it gave me an error. But if I hit stone outline now, it did give me an outline of stones just to the outside, but it also gave me this, it's not, I want it to look like this right up against my soccer ball. I don't want it, added an extra layer in here and then put the stones around that. All right. So the answer to the question was we'd first add a boundary to our design. So what that does for us is right here we have our boundary tool, or under effects, object shaping, you'll see boundary there. Our shortcut keys right here on our toolbar. So when I select my soccer ball and then add a boundary, this is my boundary around my soccer ball now. So you'll notice now there's no inside cavities to it when I fill that, right? So when it sees this boundary and I hit island fill, it's only gonna fill it to the outside here. All right, so then I could hit clear path. Now remember, we did add a boundary there, so we still have this here, and I'd have to hit delete to get rid of that. All right, so that's the issue we get a lot of times with the stone outline though, is, in sense, I get it. It says stone outline. You think you would just hit this button and give me an outline of stones, which it kind of does. But this button is meant for when we have an overlap with like we need two objects to make this button work. And what I mean by that, I'll open one of our templates. And you'll see us use this one a lot. And this is just one because it's a great example, especially with this case here. And I'll just use the one color version. But we have our design here. All right, so now I have my circle shape, right? So let's say I want to outline this object right here. I'll mark it green with rhinestones. All right, so even if this was overlapping my design here, obviously now you can see I don't have any room for rhinestones anywhere in this, like around this green line without, you know, having to do some work. So I'd have to trim this area around it and then add my stones to the outside once I trimmed it. This is where the stone outline button comes into play. So when I hit stone outline now, and what's cool about this button is this can actually be on the layer behind, so you can see now that the black is actually on top of the green. It doesn't matter, it could be on the back layer of like 10 different objects. What this button's going to do for us is, one, move it to the top of my layer. Second, it's going to trim any object that's around it. And then third, it's going to add my rhinestones for me and clear my path. So with one button, with this stone outline, it trims everything around it, adds stones, and clears that path. So these are ready to pretty much, you know, I could send that right over to my cutter. So without, if I just had this and didn't have this object around it that needed to be kind of trimmed or just close enough to it, that stone outline button gives us this result here, where this is the area that it's trying to trim around, and then it would lay the stones. Because there's nothing to trim around, this layer stays and it places the stones around that layer. So when we're using the stone outline button, you know, it could be, it doesn't even have to be a live template. It could be like a layer of text. So I know Matt put up this design yesterday, this love for the love of wine, so all the all-star YouTube members can get this. But we had another one where it's just a simple save water, or save water, drink wine. And I wanted to put this up just so you guys could see it too, how we could take a simple design that we already have and then I accented it with these rhinestones. All right, so both of these, if you don't have the all-star member, this one's like $8, this one's $5. Both of these you can get for our TOW release. The TOW release 65 code actually works for both of those as well. So if you guys wanted to check those out or wanted any of those designs, you can get this one for like, I think it's like $1 and some change, and then you'd get this one for 65 off, so it'd be, you know, $3 and some change. So, but we're gonna take this design. See if I have it. Should I save it? Here we go. All right. So I have my text here and here. And if I take just a rhinestone, you can see right now, this doesn't fit correctly. Okay. There's, you know, I'm not trying to make it look like I already set up this design perfect or anything like that. It's clearly not enough room for SS10 stones to fit in there. So this is where I could take my stone outline, click it once, and then I can add some rhinestones in there. Now, one thing it's not going to do is merge or clear any of our overlapping stones. And we did that on purpose because, again, if we told it to merge after we did that, that's where you can see a lot of like issues with, that one doesn't look too bad, but the respacing and stuff like that. So we left it so you can use the overlap merge or whatever tool you want. but we will have to go through and kind of just clean these up real quick. So again, stone outline with one click. Now we've turned this into, from just a vector design, into a rhinestone as well. And we would just want to go through it. You know, you can highlight, mark top overlapping red, clear it out that way, and go through and respace it. You know, whatever works best. Just kind of fill and maybe clean up some of those areas just like that. Sometimes it's just as simple as using that space bar and just making a copy. So something like this, I usually move this stone over, and then I have this gap here, and that's when I respace this section here. So any of those like vector designs that you might start, you've already purchased or anything like that, you can go back in seconds and just quickly accent with rhinestones. And then we do get the question, I've seen it here too, with the random scatter. We do kind of have that option in by kind of messing around with this effects area here. Again, that's going to be on the scatter webinar. But we also have this drop button here. So if you didn't want, maybe you didn't want to outline this with rhinestones, but you just wanted an accent, or just some rhinestones added to it, you do have this just single drop where you can just left click and you can like randomly scatter rhinestones wherever you want throughout your design. So if you just kind of wanted to, literally just a random scatter, you can always just left click wherever you want and add that around your design. So does everyone understand the stone outline, or yeah, the stone outline button now? So objects like this, or when we're at, when we have two vector shapes close together where we want to outline it with stones, that's where we use the stone outline. If I just wanted if I just had this object here, and or maybe like someone asked earlier, just a simple like embroidery design, this has already been embroidered for me, I just want to accent it. Again, if I go to place and fill, island fill, it's going to fill this inside too. Maybe we want that. That's okay. We can leave it like that. But if we just want the outside, that's when we add a boundary and then select the boundary. So I'll turn that purple just so you can see it. Hit island fill, clear a pass, delete that purple boundary, and then we're left with that same design. But when we want to crop it out of something, or we have layers and we have to remove those layers behind, that's where we use the stone outline. Okay. Now the stone outline with contour, this you don't really have too many rules with. You can pretty much type text, or you could use a shape like this. Now I wouldn't use a shape too much because it's gonna want to fill the inside cavities too, so it won't see it just as like the outside boundary. So just be careful with that. This doesn't look horrible, but it's it's not exactly what this button was intended for. It is mostly used for like text and stuff like this. So let's say I have the word princess and drop this down here. Make sure I have my text selected. There we go. So if I had the word princess, I could hit the stone outline with contour button, and with one click, it's going to add a rhinestone outline plus give me my second color vinyl or my vector design around the outside of that too. All right. So just like our stone outline, the one thing that this doesn't do is clean up any of our overlapping stones. So in this case, I would still need to highlight, select all my stones, mark top or merge, whatever option you like better, and remove all those overlapping stones. So once I do that, that's when I go back into my design. And I usually just start at one end and kind of work my way through. So might just drop a stone there and nudge that. I can bring this stone up, drop a stone in there, drop a stone in there, and I just kind of work my way through. So this part here, I can do a nice little respace. Same part here, maybe instead of respace, I just drop one. And this is kind of what you're gonna learn over time is sometimes, okay, I can move this one here and respace, or is it just quicker to kind of nudge this one, drop one, and just nudge that. But again, sometimes you run into that, so then we end up respacing anyways. So I'd probably get used to the respace first, and then you'll start seeing you'll get a better idea of when you can just drop a stone and then when you'll need to respace. But I just kind of again go through part of my design. Areas like this, I can just kind of move these up into that area there. See if we can maybe drop one and just nudge it. Same thing. Just kind of throw those up in here. And then maybe just move these ones over a bit. So again, I just went through the whole design. Now that's kind of, we made it through this whole design probably in a minute and a half, maybe two. And that's with me kind of talking over it too. So that's kind of one of those things is it's a little tedious, but after a while it gets quicker and quicker, and you'll start kind of the respace part won't be as bad. But once you go through the whole thing, now it looks good. I can highlight that area and just kind of clean out any of those respace lines. And then once we're done, we're pretty much let's make these crystal stones. We can go to our glitter here, maybe make that like a purple. Let's weld our text. Look at pink there. Mock-ups, simulate stones. And just like that, we have our nice princess design that, we made in a couple minutes. All right, so that Jennifer, there's a lot to it. So I mean, you're good, but that's kind of, these type of designs with that contour button, we can pump these out real quick, and that's where even some of them, like those, like with the text like this, you can easily, do the dog mom accent with rhinestones, and then you can even leave, like if I wanted to, I could make this purple. Like if I wanted a decal, I could just add a boundary around that. Let's get rid of my shirt. Remove my purple here, and then make this like all one color. And that could be like a decal or something like that too. This, we have a question, is this a Mac program or Excel? This is actually a program for CorelDraw. So like it's a Windows based, Corel's Windows based. Their newest version is Mac compatible, but it doesn't allow you all the features of our Design Wizard software. So it's mostly, you know, like PC based and for CorelDraw. So without CorelDraw, you can't use the Design Wizard. It's a macro built for it. And again, most of the time, the Mac versions of Corel don't have all the features. So if you have a Mac and you want to use the wizard, the best option is probably using one of those boot camp or parallel programs that run part of your Mac as a PC. And we get most of the results with those are pretty good. We people say most of the features work and stuff like that, so we haven't seen too many issues with running that parallel or boot camp. Then we had another question: does it resize the design for the rhinestone size? With that, one thing with rhinestones is you always want to set up your design to the actual dimensions of like what you're going to cut at. So with the princess design right here, right now it's 3, but that was because it was on my mock-up. But this one here was 11.4 inches wide. So with rhinestones, you can't, when I have my rhinestones in there right now like this, if I click on any stone in here, you'll see up top here it's 0.135 by 0.135, and that matches exactly what my SS10 is programmed to. So yours might say 0.13, that's fine, or 0.130, that's fine. But whatever you have it size, whatever that number is, it should match up perfectly to these rhinestones once you hit that resize button, or if you hit any of the magic tab buttons, it's going to pull from this and automatically resize them for you. So it should know. So once I have this princess and it's set up at 11.4 inches wide, well, let's say I wasn't really thinking, but this is for a kid's birthday shirt. All right. Well, I probably need this design closer to like 8.5 inches wide. Since I already did the work and it's at 11.4, I can't just bring this in or tell it up top here that I need this 8.5 inches wide now. Okay. The reason why is because if I go click on this stone now, it's 0.1 by 0.1. Okay, so that's actually pretty close to an SS6 size stone. So you could probably get lucky and cut this right now, and if you had 6s, they would brush in. But if you went to cut this and only had 10s, none of those stones are going to brush in because the circle I just cut is too small for the rhinestone to brush into it. So with rhinestones, you can't resize it like a vector. So if I just had the word princess, or if I just had, you know, the 2 vector colors like this, well, I could resize this all day to 8.5 to 12.5 for, you know, the mom t-shirt. But with the rhinestones, I'd have to start over at each point. Or the only way to resize like my princess design right now, let's say I'm at 10s and it's 11.4, I'd have to go to 6s, which would make it 8.2. Or if I wanted it bigger, I'd have to go to 16s, and that would make it 15 inches, almost 15 inches wide. So once you have any completed rhinestone design, the only way to resize it is by going to the next stone size, which unfortunately isn't like, there's not 20 stone sizes, so you can't go from like, you know, 10.5 to 11 to 11.5. It's going to go from like 11.5 to 8.5. So you're going to lose 2 to 3 inches each time you go up a different to the next size stone. So we always want to keep that in mind when we're working with rhinestones, is always size your design first. It happens. It's probably going to happen. It's not fun, but you know, you're going to be sitting there doing a lot of work, and then you're going to realize, oh man, I need this. You know, I just did all this work at 3.5 and I needed it at 6 inches. And then you're going to have to pretty much start over at that point and redo the work. So we got a question: as your startup kits go through everything one would need to start up a small business? So Nancy, we have a lot of different kits to kind of get you going. We could get you kits if you want to contact us directly. We could definitely walk you through the different kits and see which one would work best for you. But yeah, there's kits in there that you can get your whole business started up. There's also kits that just have just supplies. There's kits that might, if you need a press, cutter, everything, we have those kits. We have just kind of more software and material kits. So, Nancy, if you can, you can ask for Sean. I'd be happy to walk you through any of those questions. But our call center can help too. But we can definitely get you in, whatever kit would work best for you. But we have kits with rhinestones and vinyl. Just vinyl. So whatever alley you're working in, we can help you with that. All right. So any questions on the stone outline with contour button? So we had a question: does a Wizard 5 work with previous versions of CorelDraw? Yes. You'd have to, for the 5.0 version, you have to have X7 or higher. So you can actually see I'm on CorelDraw 2017 right now. If you're familiar with Corel, they used to be like Corel X5, X6, and then there's X7. After X7 was X8, and then you would think the logical thing after that would be X9. Well, after X8, they went to 2017. And now they're on the year version, so you'd see Corel 2018, which we currently carry, and they have Corel 2019, and I don't know if they've actually released a 2020 version yet, but now it just goes by the year. So with our software, you can actually go back 2 years previous of 2017, which would be 2015 version, which is X7, and that would be compatible with all of our with the Design Wizard 5.0, along with like all the artwork packs and stuff too. Yeah, so we had a question just to clarify: the stone outline feature is the only one you need to trim or knock out. Yeah, so so you said trim or knockout. So I get the confusion in that. So yeah, to trim like this area or to knock out the area around it, you would use the stone outline. Now we do have the button right underneath it, the stone knockout. So I don't want to get it confused because we do have a knockout button and they do two different things. Yes, the Corel 5 would work with the Corel 2019 version. So we have the stone knockout, and that's actually the last button we're going to cover tonight. That's going to give us, do you guys know what the knockout feature is? And I'll actually pull the example we use in-house so you can see that one exactly. So on our edit tab, we have just the knockout button. So when we say knockout here, sometimes what we mean by knockout is this feature right here. So my eagles and football is welded as one object, and then I have my eagle on top. This button will only work with two objects. So if you're getting like something weird, my text behind is welded. So again, it's just one object, and then my eagles is another. So I'm going to highlight. I'm going to left click KO, and then anywhere my eagle was touching the text, it's going to give us that what we call a knockout. So yes, when you use the trim, you sometimes when we talk, we might say knockout, or you might hear someone say, did it knock out the area around it? Yes, the stone outline will kind of knock this area around it or trim it. So the verbiage is kind of a little bit, sometimes gets mixed together. But when we're talking about like the stone knockout, that's going to be on our magic tab. So the regular knockout is for just, two vector items like you see here. But when we want this same look, Again, I'm going to weld that together. I can highlight everything now, hit stone knockout. So not only is it going to knock out my design, but it's going to add a row of rhinestones around the outside of that for me. So that's where I just want to make sure we all know the difference between, like, when we say it might knock out an area around it to a knockout design. This is a knockout design with rhinestones. This knocked out the area around it. So just so there's no confusion on that part. But this button here, again, is one button, one click, one left click, and this is our results that it's going to give us. So, yeah. So we had on just the vinyl knockout, and as I hit undo, you'll notice that it goes through a lot of steps. That's normal. That's all the steps that it would take to get to that point if you did it one by one. So just when you hit undo on a knockout, like this stone knockout button, just keep going back until you see your original design here. So when we're working with knockouts, if my eagle is like this, and I go back to my edit tab, and I left click knockout, see how every part of the eagle that was hanging over, so it's back here, and it's kind of its beak and everything that was holding over in this part. See how none of that is captured in our knockout? So we made a button, of course, for that too. Same button, but instead, all we're going to do is right click knockout. And when we do that, it will capture not only the part that overlaps the text, but it will keep these pieces outside of it too. All right. Now, if I did that same feature with the stone knockout, we don't have a right click for the stone knockout. So if you decide you want your design like this and you hit stone knockout, it's gonna trace the rhinestone section of it, but it will not trace, it will not keep the parts outside of it. So I don't typically recommend that. If you're doing a rhinestone version of a knockout with our button here, make sure we set up the eagle so most of it's inside of our text like this, and then that stone knockout will look a lot better that way. But me going through all these, when you see stuff like this, I'm just hitting undo. I'm hitting Control Z on my keyboard. That's why you might hear it tapping. But like how I have a pink design right here, that's just, it's going through each section of creating that design for us. So when we hit undo, we might have to hit it a few times to make sure we get to like our actual beginning point of our design. We have a question. Will the Design Wizard 6.0 be compatible with X8? So I honestly, Peggy, I don't know off the top of my head. We try, if possible, like if it's doable, as long as the only reason we make it so you have to go to a newer version is if Corel didn't have a feature in it that we needed. So like when we do this knockout feature, there's a lot that goes into it with these one-click buttons. So if Corel didn't have a feature that's needed to complete that, then that's why it's not compatible anymore. So I would hope that X8, I would hope that even X7 is going to be compatible with the 6.0. But I just don't know if there's a new feature that's going to be introduced that would make it so it's not. But we want to make it so, you know, if possible, we would have X6, X5 still compatible. It's just they didn't have certain features needed to run the 5.0 to like the best, or to have all the capabilities in it. So if possible, you know, on our end, we want it to be compatible with X7, X8, and above. But that's definitely gonna, Peggy, when you see Matt next, just ask him that, because and I'll double check with him tomorrow, see if he knows at this point. but I don't know if we'll necessarily know 100% until it's like, completely done, ready for release. And Matt's answer on that, when you're going to ask him when it's going to be released, he's going to say soon. Hey, Greg. Awesome. So any other questions on anything we covered tonight? All right, well, guys, thank you so much for coming. Again, the recorded version will be, try to get up tomorrow. Usually have it up pretty early, within 24 hours, but if not, it'll definitely be up by Friday. You can find the recorded version on YouTube, or if you put this, check the webinar out under your account, then you'll be able to get the recorded link from there too, whatever's easier for you. Also, like I pointed out earlier, you have your Save Water and For the Love of the Wine. If you're the All-Star member, we added this 4th design for you yesterday for free. Just one of the perks of the All-Star. And then these ones are available. And then any of the mini packs, we released 2 more today. So we have our Dog Mom. We had the Cat Mom version. Now we did the Dog Mom. So we have our new pack here. So with all these, you'll get 22 different decals, different little breeds and stuff like that. All I care about is my dog and maybe 3 people. These are ready to cut decals, so they're not going to be live templates, anything like that. But any of those mini packs on our main page here, that TRW Release 65, and I'll write that down for you guys here. TRW Release 65 will get you 65% off. There's individual 2 designs plus any of those mini packs there. Yeah, Jennifer, whenever you're ready for those trainings, just let me know too, and we can definitely start knocking those out. If you guys have any additional questions, just give us a call at 941-755-1696 or shoot us an email at info@therhinestoneworld.com. You can check us out on our Facebook page, and if you subscribe to our YouTube channel, you'll see all the videos there too. Appreciate that, Peggy. Thanks a lot. So again, yeah, thanks for coming. We got those new packs that are releasing tonight, and the recorded version will be up either tomorrow or Friday for you guys. So you guys have a great weekend. We're going to try to do some more of these free webinars every week coming up. I'm back before I think I'm not traveling again for about 2 weeks. So at least do a free one each week coming up. If there's anything you guys want to see too, please let me know. Any issues we're running into, stuff like that. I always like to, do new webinars, new ideas. So anything like that, you can shoot it to our email, Facebook, any of those channels like that. Just let me know and try to add as many of these webinars as possible. Heidi, what issue on the superscript font were you having? Thank you, Betty. Appreciate that. Thank you, Claire. Thank you, Connie. Thank you, Nancy. Heidi, was it was it all the superscripts or just one of them? All right. Well, yeah. If you want to shoot me just the email with any of the issues, I know Matt made a couple of videos using it too. So if you check out the YouTube and type superscript, you'll see some videos there. But if you want to shoot me the issue you're having, if you're still there, that is, I can definitely check it that way too. All right, guys. Have a great night.